The Final Fantasy series turns 30 in 2017. So to celebrate, I decided to review every mainline game in the series, and perhaps a number of the spin-offs as well. To kick things off, let's go back in time to the 80s, back when the very first Final Fantasy was conceived. The very first Final Fantasy game has an interesting history to it. The creator of Final Fantasy, Hironobu Sakaguchi, had wanted to make an RPG for some time, but was never allowed to, as it was thought to be a genre that wouldn't make any profit. However, with the massive success of Dragon Quest, released by Enix, Squaresoft finally allowed Sakaguchi to go ahead with his project. The reason it was called Final Fantasy was because Squaresoft was under threat of bankruptcy at the time, and Sakaguchi was almost certain that this would be his final game ever. Had the game bombed, he would have quit the industry and gone back to college to pursue another career. Thankfully for fans of the series, and many of the other Squaresoft properties, Final Fantasy sold very well and saved the company from going under. Looking back on the original Final Fantasy, gamers used to more modern RPGs may not find a whole lot to like about it. For one thing, the story is extremely simplistic, and if we're being honest here, almost non-existent. Final Fantasy games tend to have sprawling stories these days, sometimes completely to excess, but the OG kept it extremely simple. Starting the game, you're able to set the class for 4 different characters, who are the 4 heroes of light, tasked with saving a kingdom and soon the whole world. The class options here are pretty well known at this point, and take cues from games like Ultima and Dungeons & Dragons. Mages, white for healing magic, black for attack magic, and red for a combination of both. Fighters, thieves, and black belts, which are essentially monks. While the story might not have a lot to it, choosing your classes is definitely something with a bit of depth to it. The class makeup of your team can radically change how you play the game. A good example is those who chose a team of all white mages. That isn't recommended, by the way, unless you really like grinding. Or cheating. The gameplay itself is also as simplistic as an RPG can get. There's no way to upgrade abilities, you buy magic in a shop, and all the gear is simple pieces like armor and weapons. There's nothing complicated in battle either. You run into enemies at random and are given the option to attack, use magic, use items, defend, or run away. Sweet and simple. Or really boring. Depends on what you like, really. What I didn't particularly like about the game is how aimless it is. In the days before GameFAQs, you were basically forced to wander around and hopefully stumble upon your next objective. Or you could buy the Nintendo Power issue featuring the full walkthrough of the game. What a way to sell magazines. Another issue is how freaking difficult the game is. Later remakes of the game ease the difficulty a bit, but most still have a pretty large difficulty curve. I beat the original NES version of the game on stream, and let me tell you, there was a ton of grinding going on. That last boss was a killer. Speaking of the remakes, I have to say that my favorite one is the version that was released on the PSP. The graphics are a good upgrade and not awful like the FF5 remake. The music sounds great and they clean up the text really well. I'd say if you're interested in playing the original Final Fantasy, play the original NES version for the authentic experience, or play the PSP version as it's definitely the best remake out there. It's not the easiest game for modern audiences to pick up, but with some perseverance it definitely has its good points, and will definitely give you some historical perspective on the series. Thanks for checking out my review of the first Final Fantasy. Have you guys played it? Let me know in the comments below. Check back soon for my review of Final Fantasy II.